Have you ever poured all your strength, discipline, and intention into something, and still nothing happened? Have you ever felt that the more you try, the more life seems to resist? There is a silent pain in those who try too hard and see too little, an invisible exhaustion that builds up in the body, mind, and soul, as if there were a wall between you and what you so deeply desire. And maybe that wall isn't external. For years you were taught that you have to chase after it, fight to the end, give it your all. And without noticing, you were conditioned to associate achievement with brute effort. But what if this is one of the greatest myths of modern life? What if the true power of manifestation isn't in the force, but in the way you observe? Yes, there is an invisible code operating behind reality, a subtle principle that shapes how the world responds to you. A silent movement that happens before form, before action, before achievement. And it's not activated by effort. It responds to your vibration, your attention, your inner state. Maybe no one told you this, but the universe doesn't respond to how much you do. It responds to the quality of presence with which you observe. Today we are going to break that paradigm, not as a beautiful theory, but as a practical and experiential revelation. We are going to explore why you feel stuck even while doing everything right, and how everything can start to flow when you shift the point from which you observe. Because in the end, it's not reality that's resisting you. It's your perspective that is still trapped in the frequency of struggle. And that changes everything. From an early age, we learn to associate self-worth with how much we can endure. We grow up hearing phrases like, "No pain, no gain," "The early bird catches the worm," "Success is for those who never give up." These mantras were repeated with such force that they turned into a belief system, not just about how to live, but about what is necessary to deserve a fulfilling life. And so, without realizing it, most people developed an obsessive relationship with action, as if the absence of movement meant failure, as if slowing down was a sign of weakness. Effort became a religion, fatigue turned into a badge of honor, and life a race with no finish line. But what no one told us is that this model of existence wasn't built on the truth of the soul, but on the scarcity of the collective ego. This urgency to do more was born from fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of being left behind, fear of not reaching what was supposed to have happened by now. Maybe that's exactly where you are right now, where constant doing brings no peace, only more anxiety, where movement feels like a desperate attempt to escape an emptiness that lingers, where every effort to do it right only leads you back to the same cycle. Effort, frustration, guilt. Effort, frustration, guilt. As if there were an invisible force blocking your path. And the cruelest part is that this force seems to come from within. And that's where the turning point begins to take shape. Have you noticed there are people who manifest with ease, who don't seem to be rushing, yet things just flow to them? That's not luck, nor is it privilege. There's a fundamental difference. They're not trying to conquer reality by force. They're becoming compatible with it. While some try to force the door open, others become the key. The universe doesn't respond to the amount of effort, but to the frequency behind it. Aligned effort can be expansive. Disconnected effort is draining. Because what truly attracts is not the action itself, but the energy that action carries. And most people are trying to manifest from a place of lack, doubt, urgency. The result? A vibrational field that contradicts the desire. It's as if the universe doesn't hear what you want, but how you vibrate while wanting it. If your request comes with tension, anxiety, control, that's what spreads, that's what resonates. In this case, action doesn't collapse realities. It merely reinforces the pattern you're trying to break, and no matter how forcefully you move, the field around you responds to what you cannot see, your emotional intention, your energetic signature, your way of observing. The truth that few want to accept is this: effort alone does not manifest. It only repeats the cycle you haven't yet redefined. You can wake up earlier, work longer, repeat affirmations, visualize goals, follow formulas. But if the core of your being is misaligned, everything becomes fatigue. Because the universe responds to what you are, not to what you try to be on the outside. And that's why so many feel exhausted. It's not a lack of dedication, it's an excess of inner noise. It's the attempt to manifest a new reality with the old frequency. And no matter how noble your intention may be, if it's born from fighting what is, It doesn't create, it fragments. Because reality doesn't bend to force, it bends to consciousness. Maybe now you're beginning to see what lies behind the stagnation that troubles you so much. It's not incompetence, it's not bad luck, it's not karma. It's just the repetition of a logic that no longer serves. A logic based on effort as the only path, without realizing that true creation begins long before action. It begins in the invisible field of perception. You weren't made to live in conflict with reality, nor to rely on blind effort to prove your worth. You were made to observe, to feel, to align, and from there act as an extension of your inner state. This doesn't mean passivity, it means attunement, because effort, when born from alignment, becomes flow. And in that space, life finally responds. There is something deeply mysterious in the way reality behaves in the presence of consciousness. For a long time, we believed the outside world was a fixed, solid, unchanging structure, like a stage where events merely unfold. But this view began to crumble when science and spirituality started pointing to the same truth using different languages, the point where the observer changes the observed. The double-slit experiment, perhaps the most iconic in quantum physics, revealed a startling truth. When a particle is not being observed, it behaves like a wave, pure potential. But the moment someone observes it, it collapses into a particle, defined matter. In other words, the act of observation changes how reality behaves. The mere presence of consciousness influences the final shape of the universe. This experiment is not just an academic curiosity. It lays bare a silent truth. The way you observe the world determines what the world shows you, and this doesn't only apply to microscopic particles. It shows up in your daily life, your relationships, your choices, and even in events that seem random. It all begins with the quality of your attention. Reality is like a sensitive mirror. It doesn't respond to what you say, but to how you vibrate while observing. Observing is not the same as looking. Looking is superficial, automatic, distracted. Observing is a state. It is presence. It is vibrational attention. When you observe with awareness, you inform the field of who you are being in that moment, and the field responds like a quantum echo with experiences that match that state. This is not about magic. It's about resonance. The universe doesn't choose what to give you. It simply reflects what you're tuning into. But there is something even more subtle. Most people are not truly observing. They're judging, labeling, anticipating, fearing. They are not present. They are merely reacting to what they think they are seeing. And this kind of distorted looking creates a dense, repetitive reality, disconnected from essence. It's like trying to tune a radio station by spinning the dial too fast. You hear noise, nothing is clear, and you assume the problem is with the device, when it's really just a matter of fine-tuning. That fine-tuning happens when you truly begin to observe, when you stop trying to control everything and start feeling what is happening in the field before reacting, when you realize your focus is creative, that where you place your attention, energy begins to organize. If you observe life with fear, anxiety, or scarcity, that's what your reality amplifies. If you observe with trust, neutrality, and surrender, the field responds with flow. This is the great key that many spiritual traditions have always pointed to, but in symbolic, poetic, often forgotten ways. The all-seeing eye in ancient cultures wasn't about a judging God, but about a state of awakened consciousness, a presence that sees beyond form. In practice, it means that your internal state is the silent creator of everything you call reality. It's not your isolated actions. It's not your rational desires. It's your vibration as you observe the world and yourself. The question now emerging is simple and powerful. How have you been observing your life? How often are you truly present in what you feel, in what you notice, in what you choose to focus on? Because the observer is not a technical role. It's an existential stance. And when that stance changes, everything changes with it. It's as if the matrix of your reality has been waiting for that realignment to finally reorganize. Maybe that's why so many efforts bring no results, because they're coming from a disconnected, anxious observer, trapped in old interpretations. And until that changes, reality just keeps repeating the pattern of the same gaze. But when you return to yourself, and choose to observe with clarity, with openness, with presence, the world begins to transform. Not because something magical happened outside, but because the frequency of your inner field began to engage with the universe in a completely new way. And in that new dialogue, the impossible loses its grip, the invisible finds a voice, and the future ceases to be a struggle, to become a mirror of who you choose to be now. There is a kind of effort that brings you closer, and another that pushes you away, one that opens paths, and another that only reinforces the maze. The difference between them is not in the amount of movement, but in the inner origin from which that movement arises. Many times, the effort we make is a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. We act driven by the fear of losing, the urgency to prove something, the invisible pressure to reach a place that in truth we're not even sure is ours. And that is exhausting, because when action is born from disconnection, it doesn't build, it depletes. It's like rowing against the current, with strength and focus but without direction. The more you try to move forward, the more the river of life sends you back to the same point. This is disconnected effort, the one that comes from the fragmented mind, which still believes that everything depends solely on itself. This kind of action creates a field of tension around it, and where there is tension, there is no flow. You may even achieve some temporary results, but the cost will always be too high: exhaustion, frustration, loss of meaning, because the soul feels when it's moving toward emptiness. Aligned effort, on the other hand, has a completely different texture. It doesn't come from the need to prove, but from the desire to express, not from lack, but from connection. It's not pushed by anxiety, but guided by clarity. In this type of movement, there is no struggle, there is surrender. Action arises almost as a natural consequence of an internal state. It's as if the universe opens doors before you even reach them. The difference may be subtle to someone observing from the outside, but it's vast for the one feeling it on the inside. A person in alignment may be acting intensely, but every movement vibrates lightness, because they are not trying to conquer life, they are dancing with it. And this dance is what we call flow, when doing doesn't cancel being, when the path reveals itself at the same pace you walk it. It's important to understand that we are not talking about passivity. It's not about abandoning movement, but refining its origin. Effort in itself is not the problem. The problem is the effort born from disconnection with inner truth, the one that ignores the body's signals, the repressed emotions, the soul's impulses, the one that tries to solve life from the outside in, believing that more action is always the answer. But what if the answer is less force and more clarity? What if the path is blocked, not due to a lack of effort, but because of an excess of internal noise? When you start observing yourself with honesty, you realize that many of your actions come from a place of urgency and fear, and in that state, the field you emanate is one of resistance. It's as if you are asking the universe for help, while simultaneously sending signals of mistrust. What transforms this scenario is the shift in internal posture. When you start acting from your center and not from your lack, everything changes. Action still exists, but now it becomes a channel. It flows as an extension of your frequency. And it is at this point that the universe responds with synchronicity, with lightness, with convergence. Because you are no longer trying to push reality. You are becoming part of it. Life is sensitive to the origin of your movement. If it comes from connection, it amplifies. If it comes from resistance, it blocks. And this has nothing to do with luck, merit, or ready-made formulas. It has to do with presence, with coherence between what you feel, think, and do, with the inner silence that precedes the right step, with the listening that comes before the choice. Maybe you're feeling like it's time to stop rowing against yourself, to silence the noise of external demands and return to listening to your own frequency. Maybe everything you were trying to reach through force is waiting for you in the vibration of alignment. If this message resonated with you, like this video and write in the comments, "From today on, I choose to act in harmony, not in struggle." That way, you anchor this choice in the field and inspire others to do the same. Your presence holds more power than any disconnected effort. And when you honor that, reality begins to recognize you. The way you observe life is not neutral. It emits signals, creates fields, shapes paths, and even if you don't notice it, Every day you are in constant vibrational communication with the universe, not through what you say or do, but through what you observe and how you observe. Your gaze carries intention. It reveals what you're tuned into, even if your words say otherwise. The big question that can change everything now is, what are you really observing throughout your day? What is the invisible filter that accompanies your gaze when you wake up, when you feel fear, when you imagine the future, when you deal with the present? Because it's not just the content of what you see that matters, but the emotional field with which you see. Many times, we believe we are observing with presence, when in fact we are reacting with resistance. And resistance has a subtle effect. It blocks the flow of the experience. It's like trying to look at the sky with squinted eyes. You don't see the whole, only distorted fragments shaped by tension. Your reality, in these moments, becomes a reflection of your internal contraction. And the more you try to change the external, the more the internal tightens. The feeling of, I'm stuck, doesn't come only from the situation, but from the way it is interpreted and felt in the body. This is where diagnosis becomes possible. If what you observe in the world tightens you, accelerates you, generates scarcity, something in your field is misaligned. This is not guilt, it's just information, a mirror, an invitation. When your observation generates anxiety, control, or urgency, it's feeding the cycle of disconnection, and the universe responds with delay, with confusion, with more signs of resistance. Because reality is not an enemy, it only amplifies the frequency of your observer. On the other hand, there are moments when something shifts, when, even in the face of uncertainty, you feel a space of calm, a silent trust that cannot be explained, only felt. When that happens, what you observe doesn't close you, it expands you. This is the mark of aligned observation. It doesn't need proof, it vibrates coherence. And that coherence manifests in small synchronicities, in clear intuitions, in unexpected encounters that seem to say, you are in the flow. But to reach that place, it takes courage to honestly face how you've been looking. And that may be the most delicate part of the journey. Because most of our observation is conditioned by old patterns, we don't observe reality as it is, but as we learn to fear it. And so, even while desiring the new, we keep our eyes locked on the old. The fear of failure, the trauma of abandonment, the guilt for not having done things differently. All of this forms a subtle lens that distorts the present. And the problem isn't feeling this. The problem is observing life from this place all the time. Because this observation creates a field that prevents transformation. Reality doesn't punish you. It just can't respond to a gaze still trapped in the past. That's why the first step to changing what you experience is not acting more nor wishing harder. It's observing differently. It's bringing presence to what you feel while observing. It's realizing that you're not failing because you're not manifesting. You're just vibrating from a point that still holds the old frequency. And as long as that point is not acknowledged, everything will feel blocked. But when you begin to bring light to that point, without judgment, something begins to open. You realize you don't need to solve everything. You just need to shift the center of your perception, not to force reality to change, but so that reality can recognize a new vibrational field coming from you. And when that happens, what once seemed impossible starts to feel natural. Your field is emitting signals right now. Your observation is shaping paths at this very moment. And you can choose to keep sustaining the gaze of scarcity, or to initiate the movement of observing with clarity, presence, and permission. Reality is always responding to you. The question is, to which version of your gaze is it responding today? And if, for a moment, you paused everything and simply felt the frequency guiding your gaze, what would you discover? Maybe it's there, in that space between seeing and feeling, where your new reality begins to take shape. The way you observe is a choice, but that choice is rarely made consciously. It's usually automatic, shaped by emotional habits, old memories, and silent programming that operates as invisible filters. However, there is a point where this cycle can be interrupted. A moment when you, instead of reacting, choose to feel. When you become present enough to redirect the field around you, not through effort, but through vibrational attention. Redirecting the field is like changing the frequency of a radio station. The content doesn't change because you yell at the device, but because you turn the dial with precision and presence. In the same way, your external reality begins to change when you alter the quality of presence with which you perceive what you're living. And that change doesn't require force, it requires awareness, a different kind of energy that arises from silence, not haste. It all starts with a pause, a space between stimulus and response, a moment when you allow yourself to step out of autopilot and ask, where is my gaze coming from right now? This pause is sacred because it interrupts the reactive flow of the conditioned mind. It opens a crack through which the light of consciousness can enter. And often it's in this crack that transformation begins to become possible. When you observe yourself observing, something profound happens. You step out of the story and into the field. You stop being the character trying to control everything and become the point of presence that can choose a different frequency. And it is that choice that begins to rewrite what once seemed like eternal repetition. Because reality is not fixed. It responds, it mirrors, it listens to your field more than it listens to your words. After this pause comes the choice of focus. And it's not about forcing positive thoughts or pretending everything is fine. It's about directing your attention to what expands, not to what contracts. This can be as simple as breathing with presence, feeling your body, looking at the sky, remembering a moment when everything flowed. Small gestures that change the field because they change the frequency of your observer. Focus is creative. Where you place your attention with feeling, energy begins to organize. And it's not about doing this once and expecting a miracle. It's about sustaining that vibration consistently, even if gently. It's about returning to that inner place, even when the external hasn't changed yet, because it's that faithfulness to the new frequency that begins to collapse new possibilities in the field. There is something deeply powerful about persisting in the vibration even without immediate evidence. That's not illusion, that's alignment. You're not denying reality, you're choosing to vibrate above it. You're informing the universe that your observation has already changed, and therefore reality can change too. That silent stance is more powerful than any forced effort, because it sustains a field of coherence, and where there is coherence, there is manifestation. Another essential point in this process is to feel what you observe. Visualize with emotion, imagine with presence, feel before it happens, not as an escape from now, but as a vibrational invitation to the new. When you feel, the field hears more clearly. The universe doesn't understand concepts, it understands frequency. And emotion is the purest language of that communication. The practice of directed observation is not a rigid ritual. It is a state cultivated throughout the day, like a silent prayer that repeats itself effortlessly. You can practice it upon waking, while walking, when looking into someone's eyes. It's the choice to be, to not get lost in the mind's noise, to recognize that what you observe is observing you back, and that's why the quality of that gaze becomes your most intimate power. By persisting in this new field, something begins to change, not just externally, but internally. You start to feel more peace where there once was urgency, more clarity where there once was noise, more synchronicity where there once was struggle. And that doesn't happen because the world changed. It happens because your way of observing it changed. True manifestation doesn't begin when you force reality to give you something. It begins when you become compatible with what you want to receive. And that compatibility is built, day by day, with presence, with silent choices, with the decision to observe with love, even when everything still looks the same. Because at that level, reality has already started to shift. It's just waiting for you to sustain the vibration until it can collapse in visible time. You don't need to prove yourself. You need to align. And alignment begins with the gaze. A gaze that doesn't force, doesn't judge, doesn't control. It simply feels, focuses, sustains, and observes the new emerging. There is a moment on the journey when something changes deeply. A point where the individual has already realized that effort alone doesn't generate transformation, already understands that observation is a silent code that shapes the field, and still asks, so, what do I do now? This question comes from a legitimate place. After all, we were shaped by a culture that exalts movement, doing, achieving. The idea that stopping, feeling, and observing can produce results seems at first like a threat to our sense of control. But the real turning point happens precisely when we understand that action doesn't need to disappear. It needs to be purified. The new action is not the absence of movement. It is the refinement of the origin of movement. It is acting from a clean field, where the impulse is born from clarity, not urgency. Where the will emerges from the soul, not anxiety. In this state, doing is not a response to the fear of what might go wrong. It is an expression of the silent trust that everything is already being adjusted. Action ceases to be a weapon and becomes an extension. It is no longer a way of attacking the problem. It is a way of offering presence to reality. This clarity has a frequency, a magnetic vibration that cannot be explained, only felt. It's like walking through a dark hallway and suddenly a soft light turns on inside. You don't see everything, but you see enough to take the next step. And that step, no matter how simple, carries power. Because it's not born from the desperation of needing to fix things. It's born from alignment with what is already being resolved on another level. That's where the struggle dissolves. Not because the world became easy, but because your internal posture changed. And that change completely alters the quality of your action. The same gesture that once came from the fear of making a mistake now comes from the desire to contribute. The same choice that once was driven by haste now happens at the right time. Everything begins to gain a new texture, a softness that is not passive but lucid, a precision that doesn't come from control but from attunement with the invisible. This way of acting creates a different kind of reality, because the universe doesn't just respond to what you want, it responds to the coherence between what you feel, think, and do. And when those three dimensions are in harmony, the field vibrates with clarity. And clarity attracts, it doesn't beg, it doesn't plead. It emits a signature the universe recognizes. It's as if, finally, you were speaking the same language as creation. Clarity doesn't come from haste. It comes from silence. From moments when you allow your mind to rest so that deeper wisdom can emerge. Sometimes the answer you're looking for isn't in a plan, in a new strategy, in another attempt to make it work. It's in recognizing that you don't need to prove anything to life, because everything that is yours by frequency is already on its way. This truth may sound simple, but it's liberating, because it deactivates the programming that says you need to be in constant struggle to achieve what you want. And in its place, it invites lucid surrender. A state where you don't abandon action, but only move when you feel the movement is true. And that is the kind of action that collapses realities, because it's not born from blind effort, but from fine-tuned alignment with the field. You begin to realize that you're not here to push life. You're here to dance with it, to feel the subtle rhythms that show you when to stop, when to act, when to wait, when to let go. And in that rhythm, time stops being an enemy. Reality stops being an obstacle. Everything becomes a mirror. Everything becomes a response, and maybe what you need most right now isn't to run faster, but to slow down enough to hear what your soul is already trying to say, because clarity doesn't shout, it whispers. And when you listen, everything around you begins to reorganize with more lightness, more meaning, more truth. This is the new action, the one born from consciousness, not from lack, the one that doesn't force, but guides, that doesn't demand, but offers. Because when you act in alignment, the universe doesn't resist, it collaborates, it expands. It bends not to your force, but to your vibrational clarity. And it is at this point that reality finally begins to recognize you. Reality doesn't respond to your haste, nor to your exhausted effort. It responds to the silent energy with which you observe. Throughout your life, you may have believed that you needed to fight, run, persist, but now you know, the point of creation is in your gaze. When observation aligns, the world around begins to reorganize. Not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. What seemed like a blockage was just a field waiting for a new frequency. So for today, don't try to control. Just observe with presence, feel with truth, and allow clarity to guide your next steps. Change begins within, and that's where everything transforms. If you've made it this far, write in the comments, "My reality begins in my gaze." That way I'll know you stayed until the end, and that something deep within you has already begun to awaken.